Mr. Chairman. Mr. Sneed, you mentioned something in your testimony that most nations, Western nations, limit abortion from 10 to 14 weeks. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I think 47 of 52 European Union nations have a limitation below 15 weeks. Is that correct?
That is my understanding, Senator.
Why is that?
Well, one major difference between European nations is that they have resolved these questions through the political process in which they have come up with laws that balance in the judgment of the people in an appropriate way the important goods of autonomy and health and equality for women on the one side, but also respecting the intrinsic equal value of every human being from conception
Right. My
through birth
point is
on the
elected
other.
officials do this.
Absolutely. We are unique in that we are one of the only countries that I'm aware of in which for 50 years the Supreme Court set our national abortion policy as opposed to the people themselves.
Now, after the Dobbs decision, elected officials at every state level decide matters of when you can have abortion limits, if any. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And that's in line with most of the civilized world in terms of having elected officials do this.
In most cases, it's decided by the people through their elected officials. Yes, Senator.
So let's talk a little bit about IVF treatment. The Dr. Can I call you Monique? Great. And say Monique. You mentioned Germany. They have laws regulating IVF treatments. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
Is that true of most Western nations?
I'm not as familiar with the overall landscape.
What about Mr. Sneed, the most?
Yes, it is the case. And the country that pioneered IVF, the United Kingdom, has an elaborate scheme of regulation of IVF and embryo research.
And we don't.
We are unique in that way. We do not have an overarching scheme.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the embryo. In Germany, there are limits on how many embryos you can create. Is that correct, Monique?
That's correct.
All right. I guess the reason for that is this ethical debate we have. What is an embryo? Is it a person? I don't know of anybody who's been born that wasn't at one time an embryo. We all have that in common. To kind of deal with what we're talking about. Is that right, Mr. Sneed?
Yes, that's correct, Senator.
Okay. So I'm very open-minded about this in this regard. I want every family to be able to have a child, and if science can help, that's great. IVF treatments have been a blessing to many families. The idea of what legal protection to provide when, I think, should be done by elected officials. So I'd like to get us kind of in line with the rest of the world on this area, if that's even possible. We have tax credits for children. I think everybody up here is for tax credits for children. Should we have a tax credit for people trying to have a child through the IVF process because it's very expensive? Maybe we should. The point I'm trying to make is that all of us are for life. There's just a different opinion of when the law should intervene. Some people say you have no rights until you're actually born. Other people believe that the day before you're born, you should have some rights. It's all a balancing act here, right? And what I'm trying to do, Mr. Chairman, is if we don't have any national standards about IVF treatment, should we? Monique, what do you think?
I think that it's very important to open the debate and to have national standards. As I've said, even people related to the industry say that it's like the Wild West.
Do you agree with that, Mr. Sneed?
Yes, Senator. There's a statute that you all passed in 1992, your colleague, Senator Wyden, called the Fertility Clinic Success Rate and Certification Act, which began as a sort of consumer protection law, but it's proven to be inadequate to even protect the interests of families that are seeking IVF. And I think it would be a great opportunity, as the President's Council on Bioethics recommended, to take up the question to see how moms and babies and families can be best protected who are seeking fertility care.
So I'd like to sit down with you and anybody else to try to find out a way to see if we can get America united on this topic. Creating life is a good thing. IVF is a good thing. like every other practice that needs to be regulated. What happens when the clinic negligently destroys an embryo that is yours, part of you? These are decisions that we need to talk about. And, Mr. Chairman, I'm hopeful that over the arc of time, maybe we can find a way to create an environment in this country where we support IVF, not only just through regulation, make sure it's ethical, make sure it's done right, but maybe we should encourage people to use this process through tax credits. Somebody's got to pay my Social Security. The more children, the better.